We need to vote against every politician that's in favor of voir dire, of the pretrial questioning process, because it turns out that has no legitimate historical component to it. So even if you're a Republican, if you believe in a constitutional republic, the pretrial questioning process is not legitimate. And if you're a Democrat, it's also not legitimate. That's how they send nonviolent, victimless non-criminals to prison for nonviolent so-called drug offenses that are really non-crimes. So vote for state legislators who oppose voir dire. Vote for state legislators who run on a platform of restoring jury independence. And don't vote for anyone who opposes jury independence. And yeah, you know, I had to go back to the 1800s, to the free soil movement, to find a solid, long chain of examples where voting improved things instead of made things worse. But that just points to the fact that libertarians, abolitionists, classical liberals, free soil candidates, those are the only legitimate candidates, sure. But if there's no electoral participation, those candidates get discouraged and stop participating, and it becomes a recursive cycle of self-defeat. So rather than have a recursive cycle of self-defeat, I think anarchists should go out and vote every single election cycle. They should participate. Voting is easy. It takes a couple hours at most. You know, a couple hours over the course of every 2-year election cycle, that's nothing. It's nothing to not dishonor the effort of people who tried really hard to put pro-freedom choices on the ballot. And chances are you didn't hear about these people in the media. Chances are the mainstream basically didn't even mention them, the mainstream media. And this is another reason to hate and despise the mainstream media and to call CNN fake news. Because it's pure bullshit that you're hearing when they report about elections and they don't include the names of the libertarian candidates. They don't include the names of the first people to try to rise up and meet that threshold, overcoming the ballot access restrictions. And if those people at that lower level can't overcome the ballot access restrictions, the people who are just committed curmudgeons, who are maybe not the best candidates, but they're going to stick up for what's right, then the polished and slick candidates are never going to run with the major or with the minor parties like the libertarians, because they're going to say, well, libertarians can't even get on the ballot. And because I have to start my campaign early, like Donald Trump did, because I have to start the campaign early in order to have a chance at winning, I have to be promoting myself for months in advance of when the major party candidates are going to start, since they know that they have the benefit of the mainstream media. Because I have to start so early, I can't afford to have an atomic bomb dropped on my campaign and and have it be announced in the media that I have failed to access the ballot. So I'm not going to run with the libertarians or the minor parties. That's why even if the libertarians are failures, libertarians, anarchists who call themselves libertarians, anarcho-libertarians, what have you, anarcho-capitalists, they should always support actual libertarians by voting for them, because that encourages better libertarians to run the next time. And once you get to really good libertarians running, well-spoken, intelligent, classical liberals arguing against slavery, arguing against the drug war, and arguing in favor of jury independence, once you have thoughtful advocates of jury independence running all across the nation, you have the ability to dramatically expand individual freedom. And let me go through my notes here and make sure that I've got nothing else to say on this subject. Voting is not a panacea. Yeah, it's not a panacea, but it's better than non-voting. It's smarter than non-voting. In a corrupted system, does it make much of a difference? No, it doesn't. In the previous election cycle, I only had the option of voting in a state where it would make no difference. And I studied carefully everything that was on the ballot, and there was no chance for a none of the above is acceptable. Another thing, So I actually did not vote in the previous election cycle just because I carefully researched every single issue, and I knew the state of the minor parties. And in some cases, the Libertarians only have government plants running, and they're misrepresenting the Libertarian philosophy purposefully. In cases like that, yeah, maybe you shouldn't vote. But here's something that even in that case, you should vote for. You should vote do not retain on all the mainstream judges, because you can kick a judge out of office, and that's good. You can show the general public, hey, we don't like these judges. And then the exit polling, you can find out how many people voted to not retain various judges, so you can determine how much work you have to do in your district. Like, how much are the judges in your district hated? How much do your neighbors hate those wretched totalitarian tyrants that are always members of the bar association, always bar licensed totalitarians who support the drug war and support every existing law, except for the laws against unmarried cohabitation. So that's how you can prove that they don't have to enforce the existing laws. They choose to, because it's their ideology. They have a totalitarian worldview. How much support do they have? You can find that out by how many people voted do not retain for the judges. So that's the other way that voting makes a difference, even to anarchists. And like I said, I'll show this book here. The parts of this book, New Libertarian Manifesto by Samuel Konkin, that advocate so-called principled non-voting, in quotes. It's not principled. It's stupid. He's advocating stupid non-voting. And another aspect of so-called principled non-voting that makes it incredibly unintelligent is that the psychology of mainstream voters is different than the psychology of libertarians. And this is something that Jordan Peterson actually remarked about in an interesting way in one of his recent videos. The psychology of a mainstream voter actually is closer to that of a conventionally what is viewed as a conservative psychology. And allegedly there are studies that back this up. I may add them to the comments section at a later time. Or you can watch Jordan Peterson's videos on liberals versus conservatives. He mentions this when he talks with political interviewers, like Joe Rogan. And anyway, liberals are more likely to take risks, and they're less likely to be reliable workers. Conservatives are more likely to be reliable workers. I may have said that backwards. Liberals are more likely to take risks, less likely to be reliable day in, day out supporters of any system. So they're more likely to design the system, and they're less likely to participate in supporting the system. And conservatives are less likely to design the system, but more likely to support it once it's instated. And mainstream voters have a tendency to be more conservative because liberal voters tend to drop out of the system. And when I say liberal, I mean this in the classical liberal sense, not in the conventional liberal sense, which typically just means socialist. And in fact, I suggest that we start calling liberals socialists because language really matters. Language filters our perception subconsciously. Language filters our perception of reality without us explicitly recognizing that that's what it's doing. So we shouldn't let socialists be able to call themselves liberals. Socialists meaning a big D Democrat in any of the cities today is just a socialist. They just believe that the government should have total control over every aspect of our lives. And so I don't call those people liberals because liberal means committed to absolute freedom of speech and proper jury trials. That's what liberal originally meant. Thomas Paine was a liberal in the original sense, or what they could now call classical liberals. But I don't think we should qualify ourselves as classical liberals. We should just call ourselves liberals because we're the true liberals. And it's the corruption of liberal that now successfully has called themselves liberals and gotten people to recognize them as liberals Well, that means that the corrupted is being taken as the proper. That means that the majority is interpreting the corrupted version of the term as the legitimate version of the term. So we actually need to fight for that term and retake it. So we should always say, when people call themselves liberal, we should say, you mean socialist, right? Because you're in favor of a welfare state, you're in favor of the government controlling the economy, you're in favor of a Federal Reserve, right? You're in favor of all those things. And probably if they're an elected Democrat, they're also in favor of a drug war, and they're in favor of legal tender laws that prevent people like Bernard von Nothaus from marketing the Liberty Dollar, and allowed the state to prosecute him, even though he violated no other human being's individual rights. So socialists believe that even if you didn't violate someone else's rights, if you just didn't pay taxes, if you kept your tax money to yourself because the government was undeserving of it, they believe those people should be punished and sent to prison. So there's a huge difference between socialists and liberals. I'm a liberal, but I'm not a socialist. I'm a classical liberal. I'm a libertarian.